Hi everybody, how's it going? Empress Justice here, aka Fabian Deacon. If you'd like to check out daily readings for the 3rd of March 2022, then head over to Real Justice Tarot. If you'd like to check out vocals, I don't know why I keep advertising for Fabian Deacon vocals. I don't put nothing up there yet. But yeah, well, I just wanted to come online and talk about the effects that gang stalking has had on my body. Now, seeing as there's one particular family who like to make everything about themselves, who like to play victim and play innocent, like everything that they do is just fun and games and there's nothing wrong, I'm going to be addressing them in this video. But rather than some stupid roast video, because they're too easy to roast already, I'm going to outline for them what gang stalking is. So, you as a family have been hired by, I don't know, Power Gen, could be a defense systems company, could have been MI5, MI6. Usually when I say MI5, MI6, people's faces drop. You could have been hired by the National Crime Agency. I don't know if they're still around right now. You could have been hired by some people who are pretty high up in government. And the likelihood is that they targeted you because as somebody who's an addict or has somebody who is emotionally vulnerable, you are a perfect person for this type of job, because the thing is, you don't have a lot of emotional control. So if you're going to be hired for a job like this, first of all, you're going to do whatever you can to make your children's lives easier. So maybe they've hit your children with a bribe or something. Maybe you've got a new tablet out of what you're doing to me. So this is the reason why you keep doing what you're doing, even when everybody else is telling you to knock it off. It's because there is something in it for you and your family. And knowing your situation, you're not doing it solely so that you can get something out of it. You're doing it so that your entire family can have an easier life. So most likely that's your motivation, right? And even though you clearly cannot handle being made fun of, and you use the privilege of being in the position of a perp to report my videos for making fun of you, report my videos for making you look bad, that's something that you like to do. The truth of the matter is that me making fun of you is the least of your problems. You're literally being hired from high up by defense systems company. Well, indirectly by defense systems companies, by pharmaceutical companies, and most of all by the government, in order to engage in covert social and behavioral engineering. It is not just community policing. It's not just surveillance. You were deliberately put there to cause as much psychological harm to me as possible. That is why you are here. And I want to make this absolutely clear. I know your self-absorption prevents you from seeing this, but you are not even the only one in this village that is engaged in this so-called community policing or this neighborhood stalking. Okay? You are not the only one who is involved in this. There are other people around this community. I don't know their faces. I don't know their names. But at least one of them is using electronic weaponry, despite the fact that electronic weaponry actually has a pretty decent range capacity. The combat range of directed energy weaponry is actually pretty big. It's not small. It's like within a 5-mile radius. It might not be as big as like a hypersonic missile, but the range capabilities of this weapon means it doesn't have to be anybody in this village, but the likelihood is that somebody in this village is using electronic weaponry on me. Okay? Do I think it is you? No. I don't think you're doing that. I think what your role is to live in close proximity to me, provide constant noise disturbance, constant taunting, constant psychological harassment, in order to not only break down my body, because that's exactly what constant psychological harassment does, but also to generate enough dense energy in order for me to be clearly mapped out or clearly detectable for these electronic weapons. The more in stress that I am, is the more energy that I emit, and therefore the better able for these weapons to get a lock on my location and to hit me more precisely. They can't do that. This is why they've got you obsessed over me sleeping in my own bedroom. Me sleeping in my own bedroom. My bedroom is north facing. Where that bedroom is, the electronic attacks are actually worse. That's why they want you to harass me into sleeping in my own bedroom. The electronic attacks from my bedroom are actually worse than here. North facing, where everything is, where the street is always worse than here. Because there you have very, very few obstacles getting in the way of the directed energy's reach or the acoustic weaponry's reach. I get less sleep in there than I do in here for that exact reason. So your role is to maximize the capacity of the torture on me. That is what you are here for. That is what you involved your children in, and that is what you have involved your family in. And of course you can't tell them the truth, because even though people would most likely believe you, if people would most likely believe you, then what would that lead to? So that is your role for being here. Nothing more, nothing less. You are here to be weaponized irritants, and your vulnerability, your emotional vulnerability, the fact that you have no emotional control, the fact that you're annoying as fuck, is exactly why you were hired. They hire people like you all the time. I've been harassed by people with similar emotional and mental health makeup to yours in my communities before. I've been harassed by, when I was in London, right, I was living with my dad, I was harassed by a family. And they always have one person in the family who is more prone to bullying than others, right? And if they're more prone to bullying, it's usually because they're more emotionally vulnerable. So they're more likely to obsess over things. They're more likely to let things get to them. They're more likely to want revenge for the slightest shit. Okay, so there's always one person. If you've got a family set up, there's always one person who is more emotional than the other people in their family. And that's exactly what makes them perfect for this type of role, right? So I had that when I was living at my dad's. And that campaign in particular was, it wasn't designed to have me move out, but it was designed to mentally destabilize me enough to put me in a mental health facility. But as long as I was with my dad, and because the thing is, as much as my relationship with my dad was not good, when it came to a mental health facility, whilst I was living under his roof, he was not about to let anybody try to section me. So he was not going to let that happen. So the whole point of those people harassing me was to get me sectioned in some way. When I complained to Brent Council, instead of actually helping me with the harassment itself, they suggested that I get mental health evaluation. I wish I'd have saved that email, because that was a surefire sign for me that Brent Council were involved back in London. So I moved out of my dad's house, and then I moved into a new situation. I befriend two people in there, and they have this similar makeup to you. They're both very emotionally vulnerable. They're both prone to blowing up at the slightest provocation. And if they're going to bully someone, they're usually going to bully someone until the ends of the earth, because that's the emotional profile that they fit. They fit that emotional profile, right? Their emotions have no wave breaks. So when they're hired to harass someone, you've got that added layer of guilt. The guilt actually makes the perps a bit more effective, because they're going to be likely to try to do whatever they can in order to stop people finding out. So they're going to get desperate, and they're going to get more violent, more belligerent. So and whilst that's going on, whilst I'm focused on what these annoying ass people are doing, and they're basically wearing out my nerves, wearing out my nervous system, I'm barely paying attention to what the electronic weapons are doing to me. So You know, so basically the people that I befriended, one of the people that I befriended, it turns out they had help that was relatively high up. They used to have phone conversations with staff members from Brent Mind as well, because they were one of these people were very well connected. They used to have phone conversations with Brent Mind. There was somebody from the National Crime Agency that was coming around looking for them, although that could have been a different situation. So this person was relatively high up and, you know, knew a lot of bad people, still know a lot of bad people, and they have feelers everywhere in the mental health community back in London, and especially in West London. So those people, the point that I'm making is that those people fit the same profile that you do. They're emotionally vulnerable, their emotions get the better of them. So when they're hired to do a job like this, they end up psychologically cracking in a bid to bully me. And when it increasingly becomes a situation, because the thing is, when I get really, really stressed out, I don't shout, I don't argue, I just shut down and I just ignore the people who are doing this to me. So when I was shutting down and I was starting to ignore the perps, they would get more belligerent, but that's an emotional response. And then on top of that, what we have to consider is not just the emotional makeup of the perps that are already there. We also have to consider that psychotropic weapons are also being fired on the gang stalkers as well. They're also being, but they don't know this. People like you, you're also being attacked with psychotropic weaponry and electronic weaponry, but you don't know because you're being kept in the dark, because the whole point is to make you feel like you have a certain amount of privilege in order to do this job, in order for you to keep your morale up. So with these people now who, you know, one of whom was well connected and one of whom was clearly on a lot of drugs. And I'm not talking about illegal ones. I'm talking about pharmaceuticals that, you know, classic instability, right? So those were those first two. Those were the first two people who were stalking me as soon as I started living alone, but there were no means the last, okay? The last person that I had to deal with before I left that supported accommodation, I don't know if they were an addict. They said they were a dealer, but they are like you, but like, or specifically, they're like your kid, but 1,000 times worse. So your kid was obsessing over me for months on end. They're still doing it, right? Still bullying me because they need a bit of entertainment in their lives because they have you for a mother, right? This person in their 20s, they made up lies about me trying to spread infections or diseases to other people. That's one of the things they did. Another thing they did is they hacked into my communications. The third thing they did was that, like, up until the last days that I was staying in there, they harassed me for 136 hours. Brent Mind were aware of everything that was going on. They did absolutely nothing. And the only thing that they did was refer me to mental health services. Are you seeing a pattern here? So every time one of yours gets out of control and it doesn't work the way that the people hired you wanted it to work, that's when mental health come in, and that's when mental health start saying, oh, you know, maybe you should come with us, or maybe you need medications, when the problem is not me. And it was never me. It was always people like you harassing me. And with this particular person in their 20s, that's all over my social media as well. This person was harassing me for 136 hours, having a full mental breakdown, doing a job that they were hired to do. A full-on mental breakdown. For 136 hours straight, they were harassing me. And that's not the end of the story either. I move out of supported accommodation. I move into my own self-contained flat. Once again, we have a situation where you got one of these freaks befriending me. There's another person downstairs, some cowardly piece of shit who had the nerve to befriend my father, all the while knowing that he was helping this piece of shit break into my house and contaminate my fucking food. So there are three main people that I knew about. One person was living across from me, and there was a sort of hatch right above their door, and that passageway, it led from from upstairs all the way into my flat. So that was one key perp. He was male. The second male perp was the one, like I said, befriending my dad all the whilst knowing what was going on, like the fucking coward he is. The third one was, the third one that I'm about to talk about now, they fit the same profile. They emotionally have no wave breaks. They are psychotic. This person also stalked me for a full year until things came to a head, and obviously I tried to take action, but it didn't work out. But this person also fit the profile that you fit. They have no emotional control. They're emotionally vulnerable. They were hired to do a job that knowingly would make them even more vulnerable, which would make them even more effective at being a weaponized irritant. And the coward that I talked to you about also fit that profile because he's schizophrenic. So people like you are hired to bully and to harass people until their mind cracks. But in the midst of that happening, whilst you're doing that, what you're actually doing is you're damaging people's bodies as well. So on top of you being pieces of hot garbage, cowardly, lying, you are also creating physical damage in people's bodies. Nils Meltzer, who is an expert in torture, and especially in cyber torture, the kind of torture that people like me are subjected to. Nils Meltzer talked about the effects of psychological torture, and he said that prolonged psychological harassment causes nerve damage and causes nerve damage. What else does it cause? It causes neurological damage. So basically, you throwing racial slurs, you making fun of me every 5 minutes, you failing to control your children, the whole time you're doing that, you're causing neurological damage and you're causing nerve damage. Whilst the electronic weapons are there to cause hormonal damage and dehydrate your body. Well, my body. So you're hired for one specific purpose. You're hired to basically take out any political, anybody who's dissenting, anybody who can't be properly controlled, anybody who's nominated on a list. In my case, I was nominated on a list, as was my mother. So it is your job to target people like us, to break us down over time so that when we die, it looks like an accident or it looks like we have mental health problems, rather than specific groups of people within each neighborhood that we move to specifically targeting us and harassing us. So the whole point is for us to die in pain and in illness, isolated, with nobody being any the wiser. But the problem is more TIs are starting to talk. And for every TI, how many perps are there? For every TI, how many perps are there? And for every perp, how many witnesses are there to everything that the perp has been slandering about the TI? So the perp has been committing slander against the TI, showing people the TI's internet, internet entries. How many people do you think are witnesses to what's been going on? How many people do you reckon? How many people do you reckon? Off the top of your head. How many people do you think you've endangered on this job? And again, what you're doing is not entirely selfish. It's not entirely selfish because you didn't just do this for yourself. You did this for your family, and you did this so that you could have something of a stable life. But how much of a stable life can you really have when you're hired to fucking slander and insult somebody 24/7? How well can you really do that when you're hired to slander and insult somebody 24/7, and you're hiring your children to do it, turning it into a game? You can't even tell them the whole truth about what they've been doing. I'm the one telling it because they're the ones upstairs listening to me. And the little boy's got the pad. So he's been the one who's been showing you what I've been saying in my internet entries. You can't even tell them the whole truth about what you're doing because the whole truth is too much, it's too traumatic for them to bear. But that's your fault. You should have said no. You should have said no. If you'd have said no, not only could nobody blame you for damaging somebody's nerves or damaging somebody and that's just one person. Imagine the damage that people like you and people like those cowards back in London, imagine the damage that just people like you who have been asked to harass somebody, imagine the damage that you've fucking done already to how many people. And those are just the people who are hired to harass me. Like, I don't even want to get into the people that are being hired to use the electronic weapons, or the university students who have been using the electronic weaponry, or the military personnel who have been using the electronic weaponry against people like me. Like, how many lives do you think they've ruined? How many people do you think they've killed? You've heard this story before because you've been on my internet before. But you know, there are people like me. There was one person like me who died. They opened him up. They saw his heart. There were triangular marks all over it from where the weapons have hit. When people open up my body, well, COVID gives a good cover now. Like, this is what I'm saying about COVID, right? You're lucky. People like you are lucky that COVID is enforced now, because apparently, I don't know if you know what? Let me not go there. Let me not go there because I don't know if it's true or not. But this is the thing. You have been hired to, now I'm going to get struck for this because I mentioned COVID, but you have been hired for nothing more than causing people pain, and for nothing less than social and behavioral engineering towards warfare, towards instability, and towards depopulation. That's what you've been hired for. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And it ain't got shit to do with my beliefs. Like, again, my whole shit is online for everybody to see. You can see it for yourself. I ain't lying about shit. That is what you've been hired to do. And that's why you can't tell the truth the whole way. And again, when people like you can't tell the whole truth the whole way, you start cracking. And when you start cracking, you become more effective at harassing people. But again, it's not just you. There have been neighbours around here who have been involved too, trying to be slick. Nah, it's not just you. It is not just you. But you wanted to be the main stars of the story, so here we are. Show this to your fucking friends.